All rise. Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. The Honorable District Court, Superior Court for the County of Wake is now convened and set in for a special session. The Honorable Michael R. Morgan, President and presiding. Oh yes, and God save the state and His honorable court. Please be seated.
Thank you, Sheriff, serving in your capacity as bailiff today for this courtroom, along with your able deputy beside you, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome all of you to this special session of Wake County Superior Court on this day of Friday, August 5th, 2011, which is called to order to provide a fitting forum for the purpose of giving tribute to and offering heartfelt remembrances of those attorneys of the Wake County Bar, officially known as the 10th Judicial District Bar, who have passed on in recent months. Thanks are extended to my colleagues of the bench and bar and other associates of the legal profession and the justice system for taking valuable time out of your respective busy schedules to pay homage to our fallen friends. Deep appreciation is conveyed to you family members, loved ones, and friends who were closely associated with those individuals whom we honor this afternoon, not merely for coming here to the Wake County Courthouse, but also allowing us to share with you and for us to share with each other our own emotions concerning the loss of our treasured colleagues from our legal community. Finally, kudos are in order for the local bar and its outstanding leadership for organizing this event, thus affording a valuable opportunity for members of the legal practice and members of the community to all come together for the significant purpose of jointly remembering those whom we collectively have held near and dear. At this time, the court recognizes Christy S. Cameron Roeder, President of the 10th Judicial District Bar and the 10th, or should I say, Wake County Bar Association, who will begin the facilitation of the remainder of this memorial service.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court.
Yes.
Ms. We as attorneys are so blessed throughout our lives by meeting and getting to know our brethren, our sisters, and learning from them and gaining from them professionalism, tidbits on just how to be, how to act, how to live, how to practice. And we have certainly gained from these 5 members of the bar. We are so appreciative as the Wake County Bar Association 10th Judicial District for you to allow us to honor them today. And I look forward each time I come to these to learning even more about these remarkable individuals that we honor at these events. Thank you. We appreciate it. And at this point, I am going to turn over to the head of the Memorials Committee, and let me say thank you to the Memorials Committee and to their chair, Clark Brewer, for putting this together.
May it please the court. Thank you, Christy. I'll just start by saying we have an outstanding committee. The committee members work hard. They are very dedicated because we understand what our task is, and we take it very seriously because it's very important that we recognize those who have passed and be able to highlight through the presenters the contributions they made, which often go way beyond just the legal practice. Our first presenter this afternoon is John T. Williamson. He got his undergrad degree at the U.S. Naval Academy in 1967, then spent some time in the Marine Corps, got his law degree from Duke in 1973, and has practiced here in Wake County for some time, most of that time with Maupin Taylor, I think about 34 years, and he is currently retired.
Thank you, Your Honor, Madam President, members of the Memorial Committee. Tom Alexander is survived by his wife, Mickey, and his son, Haywood. Haywood and his wife Jennifer gave Tom the very precious gift of a granddaughter, Marguerite, just last year. Tom was my dear friend, and he and I were law partners for 34 years. I'm honored that Mickey and Haywood have asked me to speak on Tom's behalf. Tom was a man of many parts. In his early years, he was undoubtedly a trial to his very nice parents. If something had an internal combustion engine and went fast, whether it was a car or a plane or a boat, Tom had to have it, and he was sure to test its limits. And the results were sometimes predictable, one instance being turning a Corvette into a pile of fiberglass splinters here on Downtown Boulevard, not far from the courthouse. Tom's parents did their very best to put him on the straight and narrow. They sent him to Ravenscroft School, and then they sent him to Woodbury Forest, but he escaped Carolina. And when he reached Carolina, he discovered every pleasure that a fraternity life in the 60s could possibly offer. And I think if his fraternity brothers were here, they could way overstep the amount of time any of us have available today telling their stories. Just when Tom's parents thought they had him going straight, he bailed out again and left Carolina temporarily to enlist in the Marine Corps. He left the Marine Corps as a sergeant, but he never really stopped being a Marine. Turned then to Wake Forest, graduated from Wake Forest Law School, clerked on the North Carolina Supreme Court for Chief Justice Hunt Parker. Came to yet another fork in the road. Tom's thought process was that if you wanted to achieve the maximum amount of courtroom experience in a hurry, the way to do that was to be in the DA's office. The district attorney for Wake County at that time was a gentleman named Buck Ramsdell. Tom and Buck were of like kind. They were both fun-loving individuals, and they would, with great success, turn that somewhat sober office into something that was fun. The one example I remember was that this was in the era when our Supreme Court was still struggling to define what obscenity was or was not. And Buck and Tom had as a regular duty to drive out to the Starlight Drive-In Theater on a night and watch the movie that happened to be running and reach their judgment of whether it had reached those limits or not. Tom then came to Maupin, Taylor, and Ellis, where he and I spent the rest of our legal careers together. I joined the firm shortly after Tom, and I was afraid of the courtroom. Tom would have none of that. He insisted that all of our new lawyers volunteer for criminal indigent defense. And I've got to tell you that if you're afraid of going off the high board and getting in the pool, that experience will introduce you to real life in a hurry and will get you rid of a lot of your fears. Tom had been a wrestler at Carolina. And if you ever met a wrestler, most of them have been fighting to make weight, and they're mean and testy, and they're like a snapping turtle. If they grab hold of you, they won't turn loose till it thunders. And that's the way Tom was in the courtroom. He was tenacious, fearless, and he expected all our young lawyers to be the same. Tom taught by example, not by lecture, and you learned a lot just by being there with him and trying the case together. Tom didn't delegate well. He considered that any lawyer with less than 15 years experience was, in his terms, green. So the moment when he finally handed over a file to you that was your graduation, your graduation from law school was nothing. At that point, you had graduated. You could take one of his files, and Tom never fully endorsed the concept of word processing, and every single document in that thing would be handwritten in his loopy left-handed scrawl, but it was all completely legible. It was in the right place, and you could take that up, read it for 30 minutes, and go to court and try his case for him. I frequently think that the cartoon character of Scrooge McDuck was modeled after Tom. You may remember in the cartoons when Scrooge would finally open his coin purse, moths would fly out. And there are people I see in this room who could back me up on my recollection that many of his friends frequently would add to the tip that he had left on the table in the restaurant before we left the restaurant at lunch. This mindset carried over to his law practice. Tom was very insistent that each client get a cost-effective representation. Often that meant cutting their bills. Often that meant that he would truck off to some distant destination and try a case by himself when most of us would put 2 or 3 lawyers on it. But that was the way he was put together. He was a straight arrow, and his word was his bond. Our firm operated as a partnership way beyond the point where most other firms had left that structure. And the reason they left it is primarily for liability reasons, because if you're a partnership, you are jointly and severally liable for the acts of your partners, personally liable if one of them goes off the track. When you have that arrangement, you get somewhat particular about who you hire as a partner. And Tom was the very epitome of what you would want as a partner. He would never let you down. You could always rely on him. Despite the seriousness of what we did for a living, Tom never let us take it too seriously. He was the sense of humor of the law firm, and he was the master of the practical joke. His specialty was constructing very complex and lengthy satirical office memos, and he would then circulate them, and they were so close to the truth that easily 50% of the firm would be fooled into believing that they were the truth. Many of those still exist. People have taken them home, framed them, preserved them, and we'd still talk about them when we get together. Tom and I realized about the same time that we had become dinosaurs, and we retired. He filled each day with the joy of life that was his hallmark, and he volunteered his time freely for his church, various historical societies, and particularly Wake County Hospice. His lovely bride, Mickey, finally succeeded in prying his coin purse open enough to get several very memorable trips out of him. And each time he would come back from some foreign country, and you would think that he was the first person in the universe to have discovered it. Tom was immensely proud of Haywood's service in the Raleigh Police Department, and he kept all of us posted with almost daily reports of Haywood's latest adventures. Parkinson's disease, which cut Tom's life short, came all too soon. And when I think of Tom's struggles with it, I'm humbled by the courage and grace with which he faced it. 2 Marine Corps sayings come to mind. The first is that pain is just weakness leaving your body. Tom never yielded to despair. He had a steely resolve to fight through every new challenge that came his way. The other is the Marine Corps' official motto, Semper Fidelis, which means always faithful. This permeated Tom's character. If you had his friendship, you knew it was enduring. In his illness, his vast circle of lifelong friends rose up as a shield to support and protect Tom and his family with an outpouring of love. And on behalf of Mickey and Haywood, I thank all of you for that. Tom returns to my thoughts when I least expect it. I miss him deeply, and it is natural to feel sadness, but it never lasts, because as I think of him, I see him smiling and laughing, a life well lived, and then I smile too. If I could leave a legacy like that, I wouldn't want for more. Thank you.
Our next presenter for Ike Andrews is Robert Joyce. Robert graduated with a BA degree, undergrad, from UNC, and got his law JD degree from Harvard. Following that, he was in private practice in New York and North Carolina, but since 1980, he has been with the, his title now is Professor of Public Law and Government at the School of Government at Chapel Hill. For many of us, that we remember that as the Institute of Government, but that's the new name. But we'll have Robert come up.
Thank you very much to the committee. Ike Andrews was a lawyer, a state legislator, a congressman, a man dedicated to his family, to this country, and to the small community of Bondley in Chatham County, North Carolina, a place where he was born and to which he returned on every opportunity. His love of that place and its people, its spirit, and its values was key to his character, and it never waned. His father ran the hardware store and was the postmaster. His mother was a beloved school teacher and anchor of the community. Even as Ike served in Congress, he spent most Sunday afternoons on the front porch in Bondley. When the United States was drawn into World War II, Ike was a teenager, and his parents refused to give him permission to enlist at age 17. But as soon as he turned 18 and legally had the authority to make the decision, he enlisted. In the push toward Germany, Ike served as a forward observer, where his job entailed taking lines of communication out in advance of his unit. He was shot by enemy gunshot and was taken back to England to recuperate. While he was in the hospital in England, the war in Europe ended, and Ike left his hospital bed and made his way to London and stood outside number 10 Downing Street as Prime Minister Churchill made his first public statements about the German surrender. Ike spent a number of months in Germany with the occupation forces after the war was over. He enrolled at UNC and started an innovative egg business to support a young family, buying eggs from the farmers around Bondley and selling them primarily to the fraternity houses in Chapel Hill. He always boasted at that time and for the rest of his life that he had the freshest eggs on the market. Ike entered law practice in Pittsburgh and eventually moved his practice to Siler City. Early on in his career, he was elected solicitor, which of course we now call district attorney, and prosecuted criminal cases in Alamance County, Orange County, and Chatham County. His law practice flourished. Beginning in 1959, Ike served 5 terms in the North Carolina Senate and the North Carolina House of Representatives. He chaired the House Committee on Constitutional Amendments that dealt with the legislation that resulted in the 1971 adoption of our state's current Constitution. He was the principal spokesman for the interests of the Chapel Hill campus during the major reorganization of public higher education in North Carolina in the early 1970s. Many observers at the time credited him with being the architect of the legislation that led to the modern 16-campus University of North Carolina. He served on the initial UNC Board of Governors. In 1972, the voters of the 4th Congressional District elected Ike to the United States House. In Congress, he became a leader on the Education and Labor Committee, concentrating his work on legislation affecting older Americans. He served until 1985. After leaving politics, Ike resumed his law practice, first here in Raleigh, and then ending his career in Siler City, 6 miles from Bondley. His remains were laid to rest beside the Bondley Baptist Church in the cemetery that his grandfather had helped to found and that his mother, throughout her long life, lovingly maintained. I met Ike when I was a brand new lawyer, and I was his son-in-law for more than 3 decades until his death. I loved and admired the man. His wife, Joanne, lives in Chatham County, not able to be here today. His daughter, my wife, Alice Joyce, is here today with our son, Ike Andrews Joyce, Ike's grandson, a rising third-year law student at UNC. All of us, thank you for the privilege of being here today.
For Matt Grandy, our next presenter is Duncan A. McMillan. Duncan got his undergraduate BA degree from Wake Forest in 1974 and his law degree from UNC Chapel Hill in 1977. He's practiced here in Raleigh since 1977, since he finished law school, and is currently with the firm of McMillan and Smith.
Thank you, Clark. Your Honor, may it please the court. It's my privilege today to make some comments about my old friend, Malcolm Buchanan Grandy. We all knew him as Mac. Mac was born February 17, 1928 in Scotland County, North Carolina. He always claimed to be from Laurinburg, but I think he was really from a little village called Hasty. And I can say that because my family hails from a little village called Riverton. Nobody knows where Hasty is, and no one knows where Riverton is. But Mac grew up in and around the environment of Laurinburg, and as a young boy, he would follow around such people as Terry Sanford and J. Dixon Phillips, who were also from Laurinburg. Mac did graduate from Laurinburg High School, where he was an all-star football player. He played on the state championship team and went to Wake Forest College to play football under D.C. P. Head Walker. Mac, one of his true loves was Wake Forest College. He loved the time he spent there as a student and as a football player. He could tell you every play from the Gator Bowl of 1946, January 1, 1946, Wake Forest beat South Carolina in the Gator Bowl for their first major bowl game and win. The next season, October 19th of 1946, Mac was playing when Wake Forest beat then number 4 ranked Tennessee in what was to that point probably Wake Forest's greatest victory ever. But Mac continued with his education. He got hurt his last year at Wake Forest, and I believe, if I understand it correctly, left school a bit early, but knowing he wanted to go to law school. So what does a boy from Scotland County do when he gets out of college and wants to go to law school? Well, you go to Detroit, Michigan and get a job working for General Motors so you can save enough money to go to law school, which is what Mac did. And thereafter, he enrolled at Mercer University School of Law in Georgia. He finished law school there and returned to North Carolina and established his practice here in Raleigh. He practiced between 35 and 40 years here, primarily as a sole practitioner with an emphasis on criminal law work. Now, during the years when Mac was getting started practicing law, there was a young woman named Sarah Carmichael who worked as a legal secretary in Raleigh for years. She worked for the likes of Brent Adams, Robert Howard, and Clyde Douglas. And in 1964, Mac and Sarah were married, and there followed an extraordinary relationship during which sainthood was conferred on Sarah Carmichael Grandy. As I say, Mac's career was devoted in large part to criminal trial work, primarily in district and superior courts here in Wake County. He was a daily fixture at this courthouse where over the years he helped thousands of ordinary people wind their way through the webs of the justice system. I don't know of any notorious cases that Mac handled, though I imagine that there were some, but I do know that for 35 years, every day, he fought for the rights of ordinary citizens so that we could all enjoy the privileges that we as United States citizens should enjoy. I also know that he brightened every room he ever walked into and every conversation he ever joined in with. He had an infectious sense of humor, you talk about practical jokes, he loved them. He was the butt of many of them, but he handed them out too. And
it was always a pleasure to be in his company. Now, Mac loved Wake Forest, he loved Sarah, he loved the law, and he loved golf. And I can see him right now with Carl E. Gaddy Jr., George R. Barrett, and E. Ray Briggs slipping out on a Wednesday afternoon to Eagle Crest Golf Club out there in Garner, cussing at each other, drinking a beer, playing tricks on people, kicking balls in the water, and shooting some pretty good golf in the process. Now, Mac has one son, Dana Lee Grandy, who is here with his wife, Tara, and one of their children, Blake Carmichael Grandy, is here. Tracy Lee Grandy, I gather, could not be here today. Mac also has a nephew, Bill, who practices law in Charlotte. And when I was coming along early in my career and I would spend time with Mac, Mac had sort of taken him under his wing and was fathering him and nurturing him, and he helped guide him on to a successful career as a lawyer in Charlotte. Now, I mentioned that sainthood was conferred upon Sarah, so let me address that. Somewhere along the way, Sarah and Mac split up. I'm not sure when. It might have been the late 70s, might have been the early 80s, but Mac got in the habit, he would half the time be living in his Winnebago that he would park at random spots around town, and it may have been his habit of disappearing in the Winnebago that led to Sarah inviting him to leave, but I don't know. But even though they separated, they remained devoted to each other, and many's the time I saw Mac, and those of you who practice criminal law saw Mac appearing in Wake County District Court with a case that had been continued for 83 times. And he would stand in front of the judge and say, "Your Honor, I need to move to continue this case because some of Sarah's cousins from New Jersey are coming into town and they need a fourth for bridge." I've heard that 100 times, and I've never heard or seen a judge deny a request for a continue when Sarah's name was invoked. But at any rate, Sarah and Mac were finally divorced in 1989. Mac decided to retire. He went to Brunswick County where he hoped to play golf, practice a little bit of law to generate a little income, but his plans didn't work out as he had hoped. A series of strokes left him disabled and in need of more intensive care and attention. So, what happened? Sarah goes down to Brunswick County, gets Mac, brings him back up here, and was his caregiver through his final years. And many's the time I would go over to the YMCA to watch this nephew or that niece play a basketball game, and you knew Sarah was going to be at the Y because she works out like nobody's business. And I would be startled because I'd see Mac perched on a chair outside the exercise room, and he wouldn't speak, but he would beam with a grin from ear to ear, brightening my day and making my world a better place. He did that for thousands of people throughout his life, both as a lawyer and as a good friend. We will all miss him and remember him for those things. Thank you all very much.
For Bill Joslin, our next presenter is Robert McMillan, Jr. Robert got his undergraduate degree from Wake Forest, got his law degree from UNC in 1949, and served during the period of World War II in the Marine Corps. He is, I think, highly respected here in Wake County. He's sort of one of the deans of the lawyers. He has put in 50 years of practice here in Raleigh and is currently with the law firm of McMillan and Smith.
Please, the court, members of the bar, family members, ladies and gentlemen. William Joslin. Following World War II, the writer Irwin Shaw wrote a book entitled The Young Lions. It tells the wartime stories of several persons who had known one another prior to the war. It is worth your reading. A writer of Shaw's stature could write an enthralling tale about the lives and experiences of 7 little boys from the same neighborhood in Raleigh who entered Wiley School in the fall of 1926. These boys were Carl Hudson Jr., Lewis Wooten Jr., Trent Ragland Jr., Robert Smitty Little, Jimmy Walker, Archie McMillan, and William Joslin. Since I adored my older brother Archie, I looked upon his friends as paragons. William was the one of those who most readily accepted me. This was the beginning of more than 80 years of my intimate devotion to William Joslin. One wonders now if Miss Grace Bates, their teacher, saw the potential of these little boys. They completed Wiley and entered Broughton High School together, with William leading the class. By that time, the Depression had engulfed and overwhelmed the nation. These boys persevered and completed high school with William leading the class. There being only 11 grades then, William chose to take an extra year at Virginia Episcopal School, where he led the class. They all attended and completed college, William and Trent at Chapel Hill, Jimmy and Smitty at Duke, Archie at Wake Forest, Carl at Davidson, Lewis at State, Smitty and Jimmy at Duke. As would be expected, William received Phi Beta Kappa honors. This magnificent 7 graduated in May of 1941, facing a future of 4 years of war beginning in December of that year. William and Trent served as officers in the Navy. Jimmy and Archie were officers in the Marines. Smitty, Carl, and Lewis were officers in the Army. They all survived, which was not the case with so many of their friends and neighbors. After the war, 3 became successful businessmen, and as they prospered, became very generous philanthropists. 4 became lawyers, with Jimmy and William earning degrees from Harvard and Columbia, respectively. At Columbia, just as he had done at every school he ever attended, William excelled. He was editor of the Law Review and, upon graduation, accepted a position as clerk to Justice Hugo Black of the United States Supreme Court. By far, his most rewarding accomplishments while a student at Columbia were those of meeting and courting and marrying a beautiful young lady from Hartsville, South Carolina, who was a student at Vassar College. This is none other than dear Mary Coker Joslin, who is with us today, with whom William shared more than 60 years of marriage. Together they raised a family of 6 wonderful children and a large retinue of extended progeny. Following his work with Justice Black, William and Mary moved to Raleigh, and William ventured forth on a career of general practice of law. There was almost a family mandate that he do this, since his uncle John Hinsdale was a lawyer of long standing, and his grandfather Hinsdale had begun his practice shortly after the Civil War. There is now a continuous family line of lawyers of more than 135 years, more to be added by Nell Joslin, who is here today. Lawyers of today may ask, what was his specialty? Like most all of the lawyers in Raleigh in the 1940s, he specialized in whatever walked in the door. He was particularly helpful to my father at a time when my father was overwhelmed with work following the heart attack suffered by his partner, Clyde Douglas. It was my privilege to have worked with William on criminal cases. One particular case I remember because we were able, thanks to William's persuasiveness and skill, to obtain for our client a 28-year prison sentence in a murder case when we all had feared the likelihood of the gas chamber. As time passed, William became more and more a successful business lawyer. Those who had the good fortune to have been associated with him include Howard Manning, the Purringtons, John Culbertson, and daughter Nell Joslin. Charles Sedbury has had the great good fortune to have been a partner for many, many, many years. In more than 60 years as a lawyer, William Joslin became an icon of what a lawyer should be at the bar and as a citizen. A partial list of honors received from the bar include President of the Wake County and 10th Judicial District Bars, Joseph Branch Professionalism Award from the Wake County Bar, Liberty Bell Award from the Young Lawyers Division of the North Carolina Bar Association, the North Carolina Bar Association General Practice of Law Hall of Fame. He was a devoted and dedicated member of Christ Church in Raleigh, and during his entire adult life, he was one of the leading lay leaders of that congregation. He was always interested in and actively involved in the civic and political realms. He strongly supported candidates of the Democratic Party, but he was the able, nonpartisan chair of the local and state boards of election during some of the most hectic times. All factions sang his praises as being efficient, businesslike, impartial, fair, and right. His contributions to culture and conservation were legion. He was the founding president of the Friends of the College Concert Series at NC State University. He served as chairman of the Board of Trustees of the UNC television system. Working closely with the General Assembly, he spearheaded the Nature Conservancy campaign to establish the Recreation and Natural Heritage Trust, a state-dedicated fund for land acquisition and management of ecologically significant areas in the state of North Carolina. He also helped develop the strategy of obtaining annual capital for the state trust through fees for a personalized license plate, which was adopted by the General Assembly. He was long active in the work of the Triangle Land Conservancy and the Raleigh Greenway development. His service as board chairman of the North Carolina Botanical Garden was the source of some of his happiest experiences. On the federal level, he led the Nature Conservancy in winning appropriations for acquisition of Panther Valley and additional land for the Alligator River National Wildlife Refuge. In 1990, the Nature Conservancy, the National Nature Conservancy, presented him the Oak Leaf Award, their highest honor for volunteer work. Mary and William were jointly elected to the City of Raleigh Hall of Fame, Raleigh's highest municipal honor. The state of North Carolina bestowed upon him its highest honor, the Order of the Longleaf Pine. He was the ultimate scholar and Renaissance man with knowledge and interests unlimited. With it all, he was a delightful companion. He loved the camaraderie of his fellow lawyers. Luncheons with him were delights. On canoe outings, he was always in the lead. Chuck Green can vouch for that. His knowledge of nature, of plants, of animals, of the heavens, and of the universe overwhelmed. With all of this, one who didn't know William might say, he must be awfully stuffy. On the contrary, he was a delightful companion with fellow lawyers and others. He laughed with the best and reveled in the good humor of all. His wit was as sharp as his intellect. And like all the Joslins, he was an excellent athlete. He was a skilled canoeist, a master sailor, and the best horseshoe pitcher I ever saw. My devotion to William Joslin was given birth because he was one of that magnificent seven who was most welcoming to me when I was only Archie's worrisome kid brother. It was further nurtured because of my devotion to William's kid brother, Hinky, who is my dear lifelong friend. Samuel Johnson paid the highest compliment to Oliver Goldsmith's memory when he said, He touched nothing that he did not adorn. About William Joslin, all who know him will say that he adorned everything that he ever touched. I submit this with humility and love and devotion to the memory of my dear, dear, precious friend, William Joslin. Which one is the daughter and which one's the wife? How do you get your... Oh, not there.
For Herb Toms, our presenter is Charles Chuck Green. Chuck attended undergrad at UNC and also got his law degree there in 1965. Chuck and I are similar in that we both have been practicing here in Raleigh for 40 years, and the difference is he's already retired, but I'm fast on his heels myself. But we'll ask Chuck to come up.
Thank you, Clark. May it please the court. You know, when I was a young lawyer, they came in, they asked for some advice about public speaking. And they said, whatever you do, don't follow Robin McMillan. You know, today I violated it twice. I'm following 2 McMillans. Nevertheless, I feel a little bit like a pair of brown shoes in a room full of tuxedos with that. But anyway, may it please the court, I am pleased to have been given the opportunity today to remember our friend and colleague Herb Toms. Most of the attorneys present today will remember him as the Dean of the Title Insurance Bar here in Wake County and remember his contributions in this area for a period over 45 years, which I'll discuss later. However, when attending these ceremonies in the past, I have been impressed with the fact that the lawyers being remembered have been much more complex, interesting, and complete individuals than we realize in dealing with them on a day-to-day basis. So I will tell you the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey used to say. This was certainly the case with Herb. He was born in Shelby, North Carolina in 1928 and spent his youth there where his father worked for County Mills. One of his fondest memories was of his father taking him to the plant to ring the bell of the plant to celebrate the end of World War II. Herb completed high school in Shelby and after graduation enrolled in the Penn State College of Optometry, graduating in 1949. Shortly after beginning his practice, he was called up for his military obligation and went to Fort Chaffee, Arkansas, where he continued to practice optometry and achieved the rank of captain. He thoroughly enjoyed the service and made friends which he would keep up with for the rest of his life. Several of these friends were from Raleigh, and this may well have influenced his decision to later locate here. After completing his 2-year tour of duty, where he probably saw more patients in 1 year than he'd normally see in twice his time, he returned to practice in Concord. He had always been interested in politics, and when he got back to Concord, he joined the Young Democrats. Many of the people he met were lawyers, and Herb became interested in law school. He contacted Dean Henry Brandis at Carolina, asked him could he come up and talk to him. And when he did, Dean Brandis said, well, you know, Herb, I've never had anybody who had an optometry degree apply to law school, but I don't see any reason it wouldn't work out. And it did. Herb was a diligent student, became a member of the Law Review, and graduated with honors. One Friday in the fall when he was studying in the library, he could hear the cheers from Keenan Stadium. And he remarked, if I ever get out of this law school, I'll come to every game and eat fried chicken in the parking lot to my heart's content. I think he pretty well lived up to that. And Margaret, who is with us today, his wife, ended up cooking a lot of fried chicken in the pre-Colonel Sanders days. He began his legal career in Raleigh in 1958 with the firm of Arundel, Albright, and Green. the Green being my father, and soon thereafter made was probably what was his best decision, in that he married Margaret Dunn, who is with us today and was married to Herb for 51 years. After several years, he became a partner with John Jordan and Bill Dawkins and formed the firm of Jordan, Dawkins, and Tom. And he would continue with this firm until he was recruited several years later by Snow Holden to run First Title Insurance. He continued in the title insurance business and became president and general counsel of AMI Title, its regional office, where he remained until 1975, when he became one of the organizers and chairman of the board of the newly formed United Title. At this point, his mother expressed her concern, saying she was afraid Herb was unable to hold a job. Herb must have addressed her concerns before he stayed with United Title for the next 35 years. Once at United Title, when he got the company off the ground, Herb was able to pursue two of his avocations, golf and travel. Now, Herb was never mistaken for Jack Nicklaus, but he worked hard at his golf game, attending 2 schools. His son Logan, who is also with us today, said he came back with a tan, a lovely new set of clothes, and the same old golf game. At United, Herb set up trips for CLE, for lawyers and mortgage loan officials, and anyone who ever took one of those trips, and I happen to be fortunate to take one, remembers the fun they had on the trips. They remember the restaurants they went to. They remember the sightseeing. Hadn't found a single soul remember anything about the CLE. During Herb's tenure, the real estate industry and the mortgage industry were undergoing rapid changes. Lawyers were replaced in the Register of Deeds by paralegals. Loan papers were prepared by the mortgage loan company instead of lawyers, and there was mortgages without surveys and title searches. And although Herb was an innovative executive who instituted many changes, he strongly believed in retaining many of the traditional safeguards in real estate transactions, particularly the practice of having lawyers play a prominent role in these matters, providing representation for both buyers and sellers independent from the lenders. This position was not always popular with forces in the industry who considered attorneys at best a necessary evil. But Herb did not waver as a strong advocate for the real estate bar. I would like to read from one of his newsletters published just a year before his death, which was provided by Gordon Herbert, who worked with Herb for many years. And this is it. For 40 years now, I have been accused of screaming about protecting lawyers in real estate practice. We have always believed in promoting the role of the experienced real estate attorney in the closing process. We believe that attorneys can provide most valuable service to their clients by exercising independent judgment and legal expertise, and we will continue to do everything we can to promote the role of the attorney in real estate practice. Although Herb stood firm in his years at United Title, where he continued to practice until shortly before his death at the age of 82, ultimately attorneys have played a less prominent role in real estate transactions instead of the larger role Herb so vigorously advocated. Were Herb here today, he might well tell us, and I'm sure he would if he knew Herb, that a number of the problems encountered over the last 4 years in the mortgage loan industry could have been avoided had they adopted the standards he advocated for over 40 years in his seminars and newsletters, and he would be right. Herb was an excellent attorney, a good man, a loyal friend, and a strong advocate for our profession. He'll be missed.
I want to thank the presenters as usual. We learned a lot, and it always strikes me when I attend this just how outstanding the lawyers are that we practice with, and how good a job the presenters do of showing us what kind of lives they led.
Mr. Brewer, thank you. Thanks to all of you for your attendance today at this excellent, noteworthy, and meaningful program. We've all been surely enriched by these proceedings, just as we have all been enriched by the cherished lives of those whom we fondly remember today. May we leave this place now with the motivation and the determination to positively enhance the well-being of others in the name of justice, as those we have honored today endeavored to do, while remembering them along our own journey of life. Mr. Bailiff, if you will, please recess us sine die.
All rise. Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. This special setting of Superior Court for the County of Wake now stands adjourned. Sine die. God save this state and this honorable court.